Welcome to the Parentreneur podcast. I'm your host, Jake Haynes. Welcome. Today, I thought it'd be fun to talk a little bit more about the failed businesses that led me to eventually starting my own successful business this past year. As I talked about, the foundation of my successful business lies many bones of failed businesses. I began to recount them yesterday, and I thought it was maybe just like 2 or 3 ideas that I had, but I began to see a pattern that I was a chronic business starter. So it actually ended up being like 6 or 7 different businesses that I started at some point. And so today I wanted to go over each one of them, and we'll talk a little bit more about what was it, what did I learn from it, why did it fail, and what you can learn from it to make sure that you're not in that situation as I was. So back, I believe in 2017, the first one was called Minimal Coffee Company. It was an e-commerce brand with a specific focus around sustainability. So I think it was going to be organic coffee, which I value organic things, as well as sustainability. So it was going to be like fully compostable bags, net neutral shipping and all that stuff. Me and my wife, we really got into the minimalist podcast early in our marriage, which helped us keep things light and to get rid of things when we were combining our stuff together. But it's also helped us be able to balance wanting nicer things, but also not hoarding onto things just for the sake of hoarding onto things. It's the balance of kind of wanting material things, but knowing what their place is. The minimalist podcast, their tagline is love people and use things because the opposite never works. And so part of that, of the sustainability kind of comes from that, of wanting to do more with less. And so we really were into the sustainability practices, and we still carry some of those things today of just not being very wasteful. But we go to Costco where there's a lot of packaging and stuff, just because as a parent, it's a little bit different landscape for what as you're trying to balance all those things. So with that being said, sustainability was really a big passion for us back then. And so the e-commerce brand was actually a pretty good idea. It failed because I wanted to move and to not be tied to distributor. A funny story here. One of the craziest things that probably has ever happened to me. I was looking for a distributor, and I reached out to a guy who is a legend in the coffee space around the Boone, North Carolina area. I reached out to him knowing that his coffee is fantastic. And I said, hey, I'll be in town. I'd love to get to know you. This is my idea, the e-commerce brand that I'm looking to start, but I need to find a distributor. He said, yeah, come on by. Let's talk. So we sat down and we talked for hours, and he was on board with helping me, with him being the distributor for, my coffee company. He even pulled me aside and was like, hey, listen, my previous retail shop is no longer around due to a natural disaster. But if you are open to it and maybe open to moving from Charlotte to here, I would love to start a new retail shop, a cafe, and maybe we could potentially talk about the opportunity of splitting the business and you leading the front store. Which is crazy. I mean, this guy who's had a successful coffee company for decades is now pulling me in and potentially splitting the opportunity of helping him grow his business. So that whole brand, came out because of that opportunity, or that whole opportunity came out from Minimal Coffee Company. So it was fascinating, and it was a dream. But I said ultimately no because we knew that we wanted to move to the Nashville area when we were in the Charlotte area. So we just weren't at the place where we wanted to move to West North Carolina. So could the Minimal Coffee Company idea work, that e-commerce brand? I give it a maybe, like a 6.5 out of 10. The idea is not bad. In fact, coffee and sustainability is pretty hot right now, and there's a few big coffee brands like Trade Coffee that I use that has popped up and are really big companies. But it would have been a very big undertaking to figure out the logistics of it all, meaning finding a distributor and getting that flow down, eventually hiring employees. Like that would have been a big 3 to 5 year process before I'd probably even be able to take any profit out of the business. So it would have been a very large undertaking, but I think maybe it's a 6.5 out of 10 on the viability of the idea. And that you'll kind of see that a little bit more here as we get into these ideas, is most of these could have worked. And that's one of the tips I want to talk about here at the end. The second idea was about, and maybe a year later, was college tuition saving consulting / course. So for those who don't know, I saved tens of thousands through tuition hacking, and I graduated early 3 times because of a mixture of dual enrollment and a few other strategies that helped me go to college at the age of 16. So I graduated my associates at 18, bachelor's at 20, MBA at 22. And most people, even if you go to high school, because I was homeschooled, but if you go to high school, usually with like dual enrollment and some of the credits you can take, like APs, you can really reduce the load of coursework that you take to your institution. As long as you're intentional and you know exactly how things transfer, it's really easy to be able to map all that out and literally save tens of thousands of dollars and graduate early. I worked in admissions at that time as well, or prior to that, a few years before that actually, for my alma mater. And so I knew this inside and out because I did it myself, and I also helped students come to the university, and I saw how easy it actually was. So everyone said it was a really good idea, but it ultimately didn't work because we couldn't find, me and my partner at that time in the business, couldn't really find anyone within our network that we could get our first few testimonials in. Everyone was like, yes, I absolutely want to look at this. But when rubber was meeting the road, not many people were actually taking us up where we could figure out the workflow and the operations. So ultimately, could it have worked, the college savings, tuition, consulting, and course? Absolutely. I think this was actually a killer idea, and I wish I stuck with this one out of all of them because it was a great idea and it could have earned passive income. I think we just got caught in the dip of figuring out our marketing and sales and how to kind of grow that community. But if we could just have continued to give it a little bit more fuel to that fire and just edged it along to where we would have built that community, then it really would have been huge and potentially, been life-changing money passively or relatively passively. Would I have wanted to do that for the long term? Absolutely not. But it was a very good idea. The other idea about a year later, I believe this is right around COVID, like 2021, 2020, was a company called Creamier. It was a vegan, organic, dairy-free powder coffee creamer. The reason why this even was created is because my wife at the time, due to breastfeeding our oldest now, he had a dairy intolerance, so she didn't eat dairy. And because of that, she was having a really hard time finding good dairy creamers, much less some that were portable. There's only like 1 or 2 in the market. And the stuff you get in the grocery stores were just terrible. So, this was COVID time, so we were just in the house anyways. And so I took this on as a passion project to figure out if I could create something delicious based off organic ingredients and, again, sustainable packaging and things like that. And we did. It was super, super delicious, all organic. It was better than anything else on the market. And there was a big creamer company called Laird's. The surfer started, if you don't know who Laird is, Laird is a surfer out of Hawaii, and he started kind of a superfoods company, and he has a powdered creamer that is the biggest in the market. So considering that, yes, the market showed that people would pay for it. I just have to figure out margins. And I even got on a vegan marketplace, which again is a tip I've given to you all, whether you have a service or a product. If you can get on a marketplace, like if you're selling a physical good, get on Amazon. Or if you're offering a service, get on a Thumbtack or a Bark. that really helps you get off the ground and helps you articulate your marketing, get the first few sales, and really know how to refine your business more and niche down so that you can really grow at scale. And that's exactly what I did. So, A plus on that aspect. However, even though I got a few sales, it was hard to get things compounding. And so after a while, I just kind of gave up on it because, again, it would have been a big logistical deal. And also the cottage laws get a little bit fuzzy. I would have to get a location or do it out of rent a kitchen. So could it have worked? Yeah, I think it could have, because specifically there was, a big one in the market, a big competitor, and my product was better objectively. It just would have been a lot to figure out, again, kind of the cottage laws of where I could create this after a certain point. And then also a big thing was, I think it would have been better if I could have figured out the emulsion. Because I really wanted it to be, you put it in your coffee and you could just stir it with a spoon. But it wasn't the case, because it was made out of like cashew and coconut and maple syrup sugar. And so it just really didn't have good emulsification. And that's the same problem with the other powders in the industry. So it was kind of industry standard. But I think figuring that out could have made it a lot easier. It just would have taken me hiring a food scientist to probably figure that out. All right. And then a year later after that, I had an idea of potentially opening a float tank, sauna, and cryotherapy retail shop. Now, this was I didn't go down this path really far as much as the other businesses, because I began to realize as I did more research, like I kind of wanted to scratch my own itch here. Like I wanted all those things. And there's a few companies around the Nashville area that did it, but not in our specific small town around here. And I think it could have done well. But the problem is it died because the cash would have been huge. Would it have worked? Yeah, I think so. But the problem is it's very location specific. So you'd have to upfront a lot for a good location. It would have been expensive rent and a big capital investment paying for cryotherapy chambers and float tanks. So it would have been a lot of negative equity for quite a while. And that's a big bet to place on something that I'm not super familiar with, considering my background is not in real retail at all. So, again, it was more of just kind of doing math and figuring it out. And yes, I think the competitive landscape would have been good enough to where it would have worked, but it would have taken a lot in regards to capital to get it moving, which I just don't know if I could have supported with a full-time job. All right, the next one is Valley Heart Adventure Company, or VACO. It's a group adventure therapy company for corporations. So we do leadership training and take groups out for different adventures. Like we took a group out caving in Alabama, and we put in some therapeutic elements into it to really, make it a leadership development experience. It was born out of the podcast that I used to do called the O400 podcast, where it was called the Podcast for Dreamers, where we kind of help people define ways that they can proactively articulate their dreams and actually bring it to fruition. And so through that podcast, me and two other co-founders had this idea for Valley Heart, and we actually did an adventure, and it was a great experience and people had great feedback. But could it have worked? Yes, I think so. I think there's a few companies out there doing it, and there's enough space for I think everyone to participate. So that's a good sign. But one of our co-founders moved away, and so it just kind of fizzled out. Others have done it, but it would have also taken a lot of time to figure out kind of the modeling and pricing and how exactly we did it. Because it is a very expensive undertaking and corporations do pay for it. It's just you would have to articulate the value much more clearer to justify the cost and the price. All right, the next one brings us to last year, which is B2B If you listen to the last episode, I started two businesses at once. One was a kind of product validation and sales company, and the other one was sales outsourcing, meaning that it was a outbound sales company for B2B. So it was fully managed sales development reps doing outbound calling out of the APAC, so out of like India. I had connections there and some really good SDRs. And so the benefit was a company could hire me for fully managed cold callers, and they could get around 6 to 10x the volume for the same price of hiring one US outbound sales rep. I did get a client, which was great. It just wasn't as good of a fit after a while, and I began to see the writing on the wall and tried to fire them. And they didn't want me to fire them, and then they ended up firing me a month later. The biggest problem is why did this not work out, or why I didn't stick with it, is because I just didn't enjoy doing it. Middle management is not for me, is what I began to realize. I enjoyed being a VP of sales, and I enjoy being an account executive. So I either enjoy being in the middle of closing the business and working on it from the front lines, or being the big strategists, the leaders of leaders, so to speak, and helping shape the company. I didn't enjoy being in the middle, being an SDR manager. So I just didn't enjoy it. And so I just shut it down and said, hey, this isn't for me. I'm going to double down into the other idea. And that's why I started with 2 ideas at that time last year, is because the whole idea was I'll start with these 2 opportunities, and whatever one shakes out and works, I'll double down in. And that's exactly what happened. Could it have worked? B2BSalesOutsourcing.com. Absolutely. This was a great idea because startups were figuring out during that time, when there was a lot of venture capital money leaving the market, that they're figuring out how to do more with less, and outsourcing was a big part of that. What it would have taken to actually get it off the ground was it would have just required niching down, so not serving just the whole B2B SaaS industry, but niching down to a specific industry, as well as I would have to figure out things more seamless in regards to operations, because it was a really big undertaking to bring a customer on board and then to use their tech and to help them figure out where to get leads and where do these leads live and how do we get it into their customer relationship management software, their CRM. So I think it would have been successful, but I would have to really have refined the operating procedures and owned the software so that we kind of just drop into the product and we have all the tech ready to go, instead of going through, managers at different companies to get the licenses and things that we need. It was just too much of a pain. And also they're oftentimes cheap. So they would pay for bad leads and bad data, which would affect our results ultimately. Okay, so those are the 6 businesses that I had that led me eventually to the sales agency that has been successful and is heading quickly towards a 7-figure top-line revenue company. If not by this year, by next year, we should hit that. And right now, we're just a 2-man shop, which is really exciting. However, again, all these things provided me with perspective and learnings that helped project me into the next thing that allowed me to eventually shift and find the opportunity that I have that is profitable. So there's really 3 tips that I want to talk about today that you should take away from these ideas, because I don't want you to become a chronic business starter to where, like, as you see over these past 5 years, I just went from thing to thing to thing to thing. Ultimately, if you look at what the greater opportunity and what's going on with each one of these ideas is, what are you seeing? You're seeing that I had an idea, and most of them, I believe, really could have been viable. But what caused them to not take off? Well, that leads to tip number 1. I clearly had shiny penny syndrome, meaning I would go from opportunity to opportunity instead of figuring out and trudging through the hardship of getting something off the ground. I would like to bet if most of you out there are entrepreneurs, entrepreneur parents, that you're probably an entrepreneur because you have gone from idea to idea. It's okay though. And I hope it gives you some comfort seeing that I was the same way. The reason why is because it is much easier for the brain to find a new opportunity and a new thing and to get that going. Because when you start something, you have a big rush of excitement. Whoa, there's so much opportunity here. Let me get a landing page going. Let me put in my articles for LLC, putting a company together, landing page, G Suite, ready to go. And then what happens? Crickets. And then you realize it's harder than you think. And you get into that dip, into that trench where things aren't as exciting anymore. And it's really hard. And what do? You go on to the next thing. You find a new opportunity because the last thing fizzles out. Don't be like me. Don't have shiny penny syndrome. If you find a good opportunity, it will be a good opportunity if you just continue to give it time and you continue to iterate it. Again, we talked about this in the last episode. So don't transition to new ideas. Instead, commit to something for 1 to 2 years at least and wrestle with the sales and marketing. Because eventually something's going to hit, something's going to stick, an ad's going to work, an outreach is going to work. And all of a sudden, you're going to go from 0 to 1 to 2 to 4 to 8 to 16 to 32 and so on. It compounds really quickly, but taking it from 0 to 1 is really hard. But once you do it, it grows like crazy. The second tip is don't look outside your competency for an idea. Now, there are exceptions to the rules. Maybe 10% of you out there will start something successful that's completely outside of your realm of competency, of what you know and what you do. Maybe you'll scratch your own itch by finding an opportunity in making your bed or taking care of your pet or taking care of your, greenery or garden. That's awesome. Scratch your own itch, even if it's outside of your competency of what you do or what you can provide. However, what really made it clear for me was usually your first idea is aligned with your current best skills. So for most of you, I'd suggest if you're trying to figure out how to get something off the ground that's outside your competency, it's going to be really hard because you haven't done it before. And so it's going to be difficult to learn a new skill while you're trying to get something off the ground and fake it until you make it. Again, in some cases, that is what's going to happen. Maybe it's consumable or good. That's just a really good idea that you feel like you can eventually figure out. But for most of you, if you're starting a service or business, the best thing you can do is just lean into what already you do well. Why do people work with you or why do people hire you at your current job? If that's a really good indication, if you look at those hints on what you could potentially do on your own under your own service or business, instead of looking outside for other opportunities. Look at me for an example. I started a software agency, but most of the competency around growing the business is around my knowledge in growing businesses and sales and marketing. So I'm doubling down in the sales and marketing, and we're able to distinguish ourselves and grow faster than most other companies because I'm leaning on my skill set. It's just repackaged in a different industry. What can you do with your industry or your skill set and repackage it in a different industry or a little bit different service or different niche that allows you to take what you already do well and get paid more for it? The last thing is tip number 3. If you just ask for opportunities and you're integrous and you can communicate, then a lot of opportunities will open up for you. Just like the coffee guy. I didn't go into that opportunity saying, oh, I want to talk to this guy and see if he'll bring me in on his business. I just sat down and talked with him. I asked him more questions than he asked me, just to understand his background and what he's done. How did he get this up off the ground? And just because I was a good communicator, I had an interesting idea, I'm a person of integrity, he felt compelled to potentially offer me a deal for me to help grow his company and to take a slice of ownership. I also have a mentor that I introduced to another mentor. And if they do a real estate deal around our area, then he would potentially include me in on a deal. like giving me an equity split with no capital into an investment just because I made the introduction. And by the way, I met that mentor by just cold calling him and sitting down with him at his office. And I'm meeting with him today. I've met with him for years consistently. So again, mentorship and opportunities, they just get way overcomplicated on how you do it. You just ask, you just show up. And if you show up and you're earnest and you're integrous, then most people will give you opportunities that you could never imagine by just not even asking for them. By just showing up and being there for other people and having interest in other people, they begin to give you opportunities because they want to see you successful. And that's happened for me over and over and over again. This has been the Parentreneur podcast. If you're listening to this on YouTube or Apple Podcasts, I'd appreciate if you could subscribe. If you have any questions, bottlenecks, or want to tell any stories in regards to what's been successful or a hardship when you're starting your business as a parent entrepreneur, leave them in the comment section below, or you can send me an email at the email within the comment section, or leave a voicemail on the 615 number. Thanks so much for watching.